So thanks everyone for inviting me to come and speak with you today. So I'm going to talk to you about my journey as a healer, which I've entitled From Breakdown to Breakthrough. You'll see why in a moment. But I don't just want to make it about myself. What I want to do is draw on some of the threads from my journey, my experience, to help everyone on their own spiritual journey. So the first thing I want to say is I came to all this comparatively recently. So some people had spiritual aspects to their life for most of their lives, but for me, it's only really, all this began about 9 years ago, and so before then I was just bumbling around, vague spiritual interests. I read a few books and that kind of thing. But leading up to, this, it's about 9 years ago, I've been a freelancer all my life. So I work in finance and IT. I'm the sole breadwinner for the family, and that's gone by and large fine. But then the couple of years leading up to this, the work really started to dry up, and it just I had almost no work, and I got very stressed about it. I really didn't want to have to get a proper job, and it just got worse and worse. I started waking up in the night with panic attacks, and started to get insomnia. And you know how insomnia is if you've ever been unfortunate enough to experience it. It's one of these things where the more you worry about it, the worse it gets. And so I spiraled, and it just became a complete mess. And this is the breakdown aspect of the title. Now, for me, I'd never experienced any kind of mental health issues up until this point. So it was a bit of a shock for me. So I decided, okay, I went to the GP, and the only solution they've got is tablets, which I didn't want to go down that route. My wife had insomnia, and it took her years to wean herself off the pills and things like that. So I didn't want to go down that route, so I thought I'd explore some self-help techniques. So the first one I tried was something called emotional freedom technique. And some of you may know this already, but it's a sort of tapping thing. So I've got this anxiety. I deeply, completely love and accept myself. And it's sort of tapping acupuncture points like this. Okay. Now, that actually worked surprisingly well. I was really, really impressed with that. And I thought, wow, this is a really good therapeutic tool that I can use to help sort myself out. And as part of doing this work, I realised that I, up until this point, hadn't really ever really been in touch with my feelings properly. I'd sort of skirted around them and got by because there hadn't been anything really catastrophic for me to actually experience. But this, I actually started to realise, okay, I've been avoiding these feelings, all my life, and I, need to start engaging with them. And part of the beauty of EFT is it has this great structure. It was designed by an engineer called Gary Craig, and he breaks it down into the smallest divisible therapeutic unit to work on. And, so you're dealing with one emotion at a time, but you do actually have to engage with that emotion, even though you then subsequently dissolve it. So this is a real wake-up call for me by the time I engage with my feelings. So I started doing that, and then I discovered that Gary Craig had another technique called optimal EFT, which is a no-tapping version.
Called what?
Optimal EFT.
Oh, right.
Okay. And so it's a no-tapping version which has a spiritual dimension to it. So I thought, this sounds interesting. Now, it cost $1,500 to take the course back then. So I thought, but I had a free ebook. So I downloaded the free ebook, and I was looking through it and thinking, I don't really understand this. So I was just messing around with it. And it was something about bringing in some higher power and unconditional love. And I thought, I was just messing around. I was literally just messing around. And I just sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to try and bring in some unconditional love. And I sat there, and then after about 20 minutes, this feeling started to come up inside me. And it got stronger and stronger until it completely enveloped me. And it was weird because I knew that it was infinite unconditional love, just completely undeniable, and it just completely surrounded and enveloped me. It was a feeling of utter bliss. And I also knew that, and I know how I knew this, but I did, that this feeling this unconditional love could heal anything, absolutely anything. Now, had I had my wits about me, I would have worked like Billio to sort out everything I had right there and then, but I didn't. I was just enjoying the feeling too much. So I just sat there floating around and things. Then eventually I had to get up, and then the feeling was gone. But I thought, oh, wow, if that's what optimal EFT is like, I better sign up. So I paid the $1,500, and it's probably the best $1,500 I've ever spent, because I took to it like a duck to water. It just seemed to be something that had been waiting for me in my life. And so it's, as I said, it's like EFT, same structure, but has a spiritual dimension. So you're calling in some unspecified higher power to do the healing. It has, part of the scope is it has intuition built into it, in that you can get intuitive insights as to what's going on. And also it's well structured in that you can meet up with other practitioners it's all mostly done online, form little practice groups. So that 3 or 4 of us would meet up each week and go through the coursework and practice on each other, which was really, really useful to be able to get to grips with how this worked. Now, what I started to firstly, I was so excited by this, by these tools, that I was starting to work on everything I could find within myself. It really became a mission in my life to sort myself out for once and for all. So I was working really hard on myself. But I also started to notice that I started to get intuition. My intuition really started to grow. So whether I was working for myself, I would say, okay, what's the underlying cause for this? And immediately a feeling would come up of where it comes from. And then I used to be a hypnotherapist. So back when you're working with clients at hypnotherapy, you often use fingers just to talk to their subconscious. So this will be yes and this will be no, that kind of thing. So I started to use that as part of it. So I said, okay, well, how old was I? And I could work it out with my fingers. When I found I was working with other people, I found if they were starting to talk about an ailment they had, a feeling would immediately come up. I could feel what was going on in them, and that was the whole new level. And similarly, I could then start to use my fingers to sense, ask, well, how old was it, and what's involved, and things like that. So the whole intuition side really started to blossom at that point. I wasn't particularly doing anything except for working on myself, but it just seemed to start to happen. I'm trying to remember what's next. So another experience I had was I was working with one particular person. Now, this particular person he was very intuitive. He's had a really troubled child. He was born into a really troubled, very abusive childhood. And there's generally 2 types of people who get into spiritual stuff. Either they're born into a terrible situation, or they've had some catastrophe that happens that wakes them up. Which in my case was the breakdown, which forces people into this. He was born into it, and in order to get himself out of it, he went on this profound spiritual journey, and he was deeply, deeply intuitive. And one time I was working with him, and he on an issue of his, and he suddenly said, "Adam, you're a healer. I need healing now to help me get through this." And I had no idea what he was talking about. So but this has been done over Zoom as well. So, and he said this, and suddenly I found my hands doing this. They just sort of went out like this, and this sort of energy felt like it was coming out. I thought, what's going on? But anyway, so I went with it because it seemed to be right. And he said he could feel this coming through, and he worked through the issue he was working on. And he said, I couldn't have done that without me doing that. I thought, oh, wow, well, something's going on here. Anyway, so I started to explore this, working with people, and it's been a long, old journey. It's been lots of fits and starts, lots of wondering, okay, am I just making this up? Is it real? And all this kind of thing, and I think that's everyone in spiritual journey goes through a lot of doubts and a lot of, is it nonsense? Because a lot of the people around you will always say, you're just making this up, and you have to get to the point where you actually are so convinced by it that there's no room for doubt anymore, and so you've got to get to that point. I started growing with the healing, practicing people, and it's been a journey of quite a few years to get to the point where I can now say I have no doubt about, because I can see the effects that's happening with people. Another thing I started to do, which we actually touched on in the last the webinar, which I'm not sure how many of you are there, but is starting to work with guides and higher dimensional entities. For me, my intuition is primarily based around feeling. So that's the first thing is clairsentience, it's called. So I feel things before I know it, over and above everything else. So what I would do, I would say, okay, I want to get in touch with the guide. So and I had help with people to start with. I said, okay, so who's going to come in? And then what would happen? I would feel this shift in energy, and I just feel like there's something here. It's undeniable. There's something here. And to start with, it's because these entities are very high frequency. Now, I should explain what I mean by frequency. Is I found, because I'm primarily based around feeling, that when I tune into someone and say they're feeling anger or hurt, it's a very low frequency. What I mean by that, it sort of vibrates and sort of, anger, as you can imagine, would be a sort of feeling. But I sort of sense the energy of it. And it vibrates at this very obvious grating feeling. But when you're working with, everyone has their own frequencies. When I tune into them, different people will be operating on different frequencies. But these entities, you bring, there's such a high frequency, you can't feel vibration at all. And it's really, really beautiful. And to start with, I would just cry because it was just such a gorgeous, beautiful feeling. But gradually, as I basically raised my frequency and got used to it, I was able to cope with it more. And so now it's usually absolutely fine. It's always a really, really nice feeling. And but what I found is not only could I connect to these entities, because the trouble was because my primary communication style is feelings, it's quite hard to have a conversation. And I evolved it into using my fingers, so you at least get a yes or no out of it. And so but it's a bit frustrating in that respect. There's now starting to grow a bit in the cognizance. The knowing sense is growing, so I can sort of understand a bit better. But what I did find is it's possible to heal through these entities. So, for example, if I had a feeling of hurt or anger or something in me, I can sense it as a sort of ball of energy sitting there. If I connect to one of these high dimensional entities, I bring in that really high frequency and just hold the two together, the high frequency just dissolves the lump. It can take 15, 20 minutes sometimes just sitting there, but just and holding this high frequency and just watching this thing dissolve. But it's possible, and then I realised I could start doing this for other people as well. So I'd connect to someone and I could feel this lump of energy with them, and then I'd bring in, whoever was working with me, and it would gradually dissolve. And, people noticed, some people who are quite sensitive to things could see it or feel it happening within them as I was doing it, which was a great form of validation. So those sort of is the background of my journey so far. So I'll just describe a bit about how I work now. Now, this is an ongoing process. It's evolving all the time. So I expect it will change. If you ask me in 6 months' time, it will probably be different. But at the moment, the way it works, typically I'm either doing this over Zoom or I'll actually just arrange it over WhatsApp. Say, okay, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to do this. I'll check in 5 minutes before, and then I'll say, okay, I'm starting now. And it's weird because what I do is say, okay, I'm working with this client X. So I say, okay, I want to connect to client X. It's almost like there's a shelf over here. I think, okay, there's client X. Bring them down, put them on the work table, as it were. And so then I can feel all their energy, and I am given what it is that I need to work on for that person for that session. So it's not like I have access to everything. It's only just for that particular session what I need to work on. And it's an important point about this is I can't just go in willy-nilly and work on anyone, do anything I want. It's very much at the consent of that person's soul. And there are some people who I just can't connect to at all because they just don't want to know. And sometimes I won't be able to, if someone says, I've got this terrible illness or whatever and I really need help with it, I might not be able to help them because it might be a reason why they've got that illness, because there might be a spiritual lesson that they need to learn. And if I just wipe it out, then they've lost the opportunity to learn that. So it's a cooperation between me and their soul as to what I'm allowed to work on. So anyway, I bring down their energy, and so I feel it. And to start with, I just say, okay, so what am I feeling? And then I have 6 basic feelings I always go through, which is anger, fear, hurt, sadness, guilt, and shame. And obviously there are other feelings, but those ones cover most of them quite nicely. So I go through and say, okay, how much of each of those is? So I've got a picture of the rough themes that we're working on today. And then I say, okay, show me the big picture of what's going on here. And then I get shown in sort of metaphors what I need to know. And the metaphors are very simplistic, but the sort of spiritual stuff is uplifting. So there's a sense of moving upwards, and a sort of being dragged down is the opposite. And so if people have some intuitive insight, that to me is like seeing the stars up above their head, sort of thing like that. So it's a sort of simple up and down metaphor to show me what's going on. Just give you an example. I was working this week with someone, and what I saw is this person divided into 2 halves. And one half was sort of bright green and leafy, like the colour of fresh leaves and things like that. And there's a very sort of arboreal feeling to it. And the other half was this very ethereal, almost empty, sort of starry side to them. And I got the sense that the 2 bits were separated and they needed to integrate. That was what I was there to do. And, it's funny. I just have to give a little interlude here. I'm going to talk in a moment about what a yes feels to me. And this is part of how the intuition works. When I'm talking and what I'm saying is right, because I get this welling up feeling in me. And I was just talking about this person, thinking about it. And I was just getting this really strong yes, which is telling me that, okay, my intuition about what's going on with this lady is 100% spot on. So, it quite often stops me in my tracks, which is quite weird. Anyway, so back to this. So what I needed to do was to help integrate these 2 parts. And I also got the insight that nearly at the end, I've worked about 15 sessions with this lady, because she needed a lot. But we've feel like coming to the end, and now we're going to have to start doing some works with trees next, and so it's another whole chapter. But anyway, so I did the healing, and by the end of it, I could see the 2 columns, but there was a sort of like smear. They started to blend in with each other. So I thought, okay, that's clearly doing what it's supposed to do. So anyway, I get this metaphor description of what's going on in the big picture. Then I ask, okay, so which chakra are we working on today? And usually it's 1, sometimes it's 2, and I see the 7 chakras, and so one will pop out. So I sort of focus on that chakra, and I can feel the feeling, it's probably the same one I saw at the beginning. It's there in that energy field, and then say, okay, let's do the healing. And then what happens is this, I should say that with healing, it's not like I'm doing it, it's flowing through me. All right, with all healings, you're just a conduit. And your job as a conduit is to be as empty as a vessel as possible so it flows through you. So I say, okay, let it flow through, and it sort of comes out from about there. Just sort of feel this energy coming out, and like the energy pushes my hands out like this, and it's almost like I can measure how strong the flow is by how wide my hands are. So I do that, but then in order to enhance this, I say, okay, let's bring in some people here. And I have a whole list of guides. I'll just bring in anyone who wants to come. But I stack them up quite deeply. So I have a couple I have some guides on my own that I don't know what their names are. One's called John, the other one I have no idea. Because I'm quite often an ascended master might be here. Jesus seems to be popping in from time to time. Generally always work with an angel or 2 comes in as well. I've got some, I call the Apostle Collective at the moment, which is the collective of the 4 apostles, or how many, 12 apostles. Anyway, a bunch of apostles come in, and sometimes I bring some others. But what I notice is the difference between what I'm able to do on my own and when I've stacked all them on, goes up about 2 or 3-fold. It's much, much stronger. And the arms will go out more and things. And then I just sit there, and it's usually about 20 minutes, and this just stuff's flowing through me, and I can think about other things, think about the shopping, it's all flowing. And then when it's getting towards the end, I feel it's starting to, the arms start to go in, and it's coming to, and then the arms just do like that, and he shuts down on his own. And then at the end, I'll typically send a message to them if it's over WhatsApp saying, okay, this is what I noticed, this is what I was told, this is what you need to know, and, things like that. And I always ask how many more sessions do they need, and then do it like that. So that's generally how it works. Now, as I said, this is an ongoing journey, and things are really starting to open up. Earlier on in the year, I went to Cornwall, and was a friend of mine who works a lot with the earth took me to a stone circle, and she said, "Just see what happens." And I walked into the stone circle, and I can feel this again. It initiated me. The stone circle initiated me. It said, okay, it didn't speak, but it showed me this is how you open up a circle, and this is the energy you use. There are two different energies. This is how you heal things. And then it said, okay, you need to practice this. And so I thought, okay, well, show me a bit of land that needs healing, and I know Cornwall quite well. I've gone down there quite a lot, so I did this and practiced, and I felt energy flowing, and I felt the wound in the earth, and I felt the wound shrink and disappear, and then you have to close the circle again. And I also mentioned trees. Because of this client, I thought I better start exploring trees, because I need to show them how they can do it, because as part of what they're here for is for them to start working with trees. And so I started to explore this. I started to feel this, and I've been healing myself with trees. So letting a tree hug me and the energy flow and things like that. And I was shown, okay, this is how you open up a tree connection. So again, it's an energy, and so it's an ongoing journey. And various intuitive people who know me say this is just the start. Which I thought, bloody hell, if this is just the start, where is this going to end up? Anyway. So that's my journey. Now, as I said at the beginning, I like to just draw on some threads from this, because the first thing I want to say is spirituality is it's very much an experiential thing, and I think this is very important that people know that it's not an intellectual exercise in belief. It's not like, okay, I'm a Catholic now, so I have to believe what Catholics believe. And it's about, you need to know this stuff really for it to be true. Otherwise, it's just abstract concepts. Everyone's journey is about how you come to know how the universe, or God, or whatever you want to call it, will talk to you and communicate. Like I talked about what my yes is like. Everyone will have a yes, and everyone will have a no. We talk about gut instinct. We all have this sort of thing, but we live in our heads, and we're all thinking about, okay, what ought I to do, but rather than feeling it and asking you, what should I do here? And just wait for an answer to come. Yes, in Conversations with God, I don't know if you've read that book, but at the beginning, he does say that God says, I'm talking to you all the time. It's just a question of whether you're listening. And, it's about getting into that state. And so basically these days, many of my important life decisions, I'll ask my fingers quite often, but I just say, okay, I know there's a perfect solution which is going to come, and I'm just going to wait till it really slaps me in the face. Another thing I want to say about it is spirituality is not in your head. It's a journey of the heart. It really is ultimately it's about opening up your heart to this stuff. You can't think your way into enlightenment, but one more key point is that, as I talked about on this, for me, when I got these therapeutic tools, I just went at it gung-ho to try and sort myself out and things like that. And I do think that a key part of this journey is about getting rid of the emotional baggage which stands between you and your natural light. The truth is, the universe, life is this beautiful, gorgeous spiritual experience all the time. I mean, it just is. But we're sort of, look, we've got this, imagine it's a beautiful countryside, to use this metaphor. It's just a gorgeous thing to see. But we're stuck in this fog in the middle of our own emotional baggage. It surrounds us, and we can't see the beautiful countryside because we're stuck in this fog. But as you gradually start to work on your own stuff and pull away the shrouds of limiting beliefs and self-doubt and things like that, it allows the chink of light to come in, and you actually gradually start to expand. So for me, it's been an integral part of my journey, and all the really deep, wise, spiritual people I know are all doing the same kind of thing. It's all about letting go of your limiting beliefs, expanding, working on yourself the whole time. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. I'm all yours. Just ask whatever you want now.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I always want to know, you've got the angels come in, the guides come in, someone else comes in, they all come in. How come they all agree with each other? I've always wondered that. You've got angels, you've got guides. Do they really agree with each other, or do they go dip between them and then come to an agreement? Or just
when I'm doing the healing, that's not like we're having a round table discussion or anything. It's basically I'm just using their frequency, and so I'm just stacking the frequencies on top of it. So, and although they're not actually doing anything apart from just being.
Well, they have to be agreeing with each other. That's all I think.
So.
That raises an interesting point, actually. If I use that as a topic, I've got several questions, but I'll jump on this one first, which is, who does the healing? Okay, who does the healing?
Well, good question. I don't really know. I mean, I'd say it's a good question. You know, if you're working with an entity, you're using their frequency to do the healing. But at the deepest level, it's all one anyway. So, you know, it's just one part of the universe. It's almost like just a flow of energy from one part to another part, just to rebalance, you know. So you've got a disturbance there, and it's just doing that. But, you know, on a dualistic level, you could say that, you know, it's and I don't know what the source of my healing is, which is very interesting now you say that. I'm connecting to something's flowing out through me. I don't know where that's coming from. I do know, because I've seen this, you know, in what people glibly call the higher dimensions, there are sort of spaces where there are just pure emotions, you know. I've seen... as a child, actually, I didn't really touch on this, but as a child, I used to be able to see really well, clairvoyance, and then it freaked me out so much. I was about 3 or 4. I just shut it all down. But I have seen dimensions of pure darkness and evil, and things, which one of them would freak you out, as you can imagine. But, you know, but there must be a dimension of pure love and unconditional love, you know, and maybe it's, you know, tapping into that and it's coming through. I don't know. It's a very good question, and I don't know the answer.
You mentioned earlier that we're conduits. Don't you think if you're open to the spirit and so on, you're just the conduit that they're using?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the healing comes from them, really.
Yes.
And it comes through us.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm just a conduit.
It's a multifaceted way of healing.
But ultimately, we heal ourselves. I feel we have to be open to it. Don't we?
We have to be open to it. I don't think we heal ourselves. I think whoever is the higher being, or whoever it is, heals us. I don't know, do you?
I think it's really hard to understand at this level, at the physical level, because we're actually talking about in multiple dimensions.
I find it very easy.
No, but on one level, what I'm saying is, depending on your perspective, it can look like you go to a doctor and the doctor heals you, for example.
Well,
like that.
Really do
No. I think we heal ourselves, but our self is not just here. Our self is on multiple levels at the same time. So that's why I'm saying it depends on your perspective. So, but ultimately, consent is so important. The soul has to consent to this. It has to consent to change at that point. And that's what opens the connection, allows the energy in, and then the person then either accepts or does not accept that healing.
I think you've still got your ego in there.
Yeah.
I think if you get rid of your ego, I don't mean to be rude, but if you get rid of the ego, then the healing takes place.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter. And there is no definition of where it is or who does it, because the ego or ego has gone. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. Well, precisely. It's that thing of sort of what are the barriers? What's the baggage that gets in the way? You know, in the same sense of your landscape and the fog. You know, healing is in the same domain.
Yeah.
We can think of that metaphor as helping us. Either we put a barrier up and we don't get well, or we say, no, I want to be well. I'm allowing this energy to come in and change me, you know, and we do improve. That's how I think it works. But you know, this is, but you know, it's really hard to explain this to other people. I think a lot of the time it can be difficult to. Yeah. Mm. Beth, did you have a question?
I just find it exciting of the healing the land. Healing the land.
Mm-hmm.
That's. I'm only just getting into the Celtic stuff, and that's so much incorporated into that. Being sensitive to it. A friend of mine was saying she went to visit some rhododendrons that were beautiful, and she just wanted to stand there and hug the tree, but she was with someone else. So she said, "I'll have to come back tomorrow," because she just wanted to sit and be with the spirit of the tree and all the other things around. And I hadn't ever heard it so strongly, and that in your response to the land is exactly the same connection to it.
Sorry, I found in India where there is the spirituality actually coming out of the ground and it's all around you. I used to sit under a palm tree and read Kim, and it was all there, and it was healing. You could feel the essence healing the ground, and you could feel man coming in and destroying it. And am I being very poetical and stupid? But you could. Yeah. But I think you've had are having a wonderful journey.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so too. It's interesting because these days I work with other people to help them open up on their journey, and particularly it seems to be people who are going to make a big impact in the world that I work on. And always, and including this for me as well, there is one element you have to go through is the acceptance that you are here for something quite big and have to step up in a way. There is actually a letting go, but it feels like a stepping up, and there is burden and responsibility, and that is always a hurdle someone has to work through. And when this guy said to me, "I'm a healer," and things like that, he kept saying, "You're destined for really great things, and you're going to do all that." I thought, bloody hell, what are you too much? You know, it's like, I don't know if you've seen the film Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but all these fantasy things. It's basically you are this great person meant to do this, and it's the battle to accept that or come to terms with it. Not that I'm saying I'm this great person, but for on whatever level, there is always this sort of apparent stepping up, but actually ends up just being a letting go. And it's always a letting go, and it actually becomes very easy once you let go.
I mean, you say about the ego not involved, but in fact the ego has to get you sitting quietly for the 15 minutes or whatever to empty your mind. The ego's got to get your bum on the seat. Yeah.
Yes, I mean...
Then dissolve.
It has to dissolve,
and step away.
Yeah, it has
yes.
it has a job. It has to get you there, and then it has to bugger off. Yeah.
Nicely put.
I fell at that level.
Yes.
I've got some more, but Paul, go ahead. Yeah.
Just one question for now. How do you know that the entities are who you feel or they say they are?
Well, all right. So I don't fundamentally, and it doesn't really matter because primarily I'm using their frequency, and I can feel the frequency. You can't lie about frequency, because back when I was back at the beginning when I just started connecting to things, I was messing around quite a lot. I'm always very keen to explore and mess around, whether on my own or with clients. I say, let's just try this, see what happens. Anyway, so my day job is to do with finance and trading. So I thought, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and connect to some entities and let them make trading decisions. This was with pretend money, so it didn't matter. Let them make the trading decisions. I'll use my fingers and things like this. And I said, okay, who wants to come in and trade with me? And I met all sorts of really interesting characters. Let's say characters, energies is how they're presented. Some of them were really quite coarse. There was one which was so... It was just sort of like... But the thing you need to know about, and I said this in the last thing, you can kick anyone out instantly with this stuff. So I thought, no, I'm not having anything to do with you. So I've got to experience quite a lot of low frequency beings, and you can't hide that. When you connect to someone, you can't hide the frequency they're operating at. So when I invite someone in, I can tell what frequency they are. Even if I say, okay, is this? I sometimes say no, or I'll just ask, go through some things. And I don't fundamentally know whether I've made it up or got it, is it Jesus or is it just some other high frequency? And it doesn't really matter. The frequency is real, I can feel it, and I can heal with it. So, but it's a good question. But there are some people who can, proper channels, and with Beth we did all the channeling, they have conversations with people. And I have a very dear friend, and she's a brilliant channel. And, you have conversations with, and there's no doubt about who you're talking to. But
a very interesting mix with finance and trade.
Well, indeed, yes, it's quite a, yes.
Particularly at the moment.
Indeed.
Well, I'm sorry this is a bit tangential, but on this subject, I've become interested in an economic forecaster who seems to have hit upon a phenomenon of cycles. And his name is Martin Armstrong.
Right, there's a lot of people who use cycles in the financial markets. There's, just for any thing under the sun, people will use if it makes money. So people use astrology, cycles, phases of the moon, anything, as well as all sorts of price-based stuff or economic stuff. Any possible way you can look at the markets has been tried.
He's gone in quite deeply, and he just hit upon it. Fundamentally tied with pi, and he's created what is an AI system about 40 years ago, and he feeds in all the historical events, and although there's a lot of randomness, beneath the randomness there is something really quite regular.
There are people who really highly rate cycles in the markets.
And I don't know how I just wondered whether you had sort of come across it and whether you had some...
well, not that particular person, but I've come across with plenty of people who use cycles in the markets, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, cycles are quite... I mean, you've got the bear and the whatever,
Bull and the bear.
Yeah, they do that all the time, don't
yes,
they?
I mean...
Shares are low, you buy them, they go up.
Well, indeed, yes. The markets are always going up and down, and
I'll come back to a couple
I'm
of
going to
questions.
turn off the recording.
Well, I thought I'd keep it going,
might do that as well, there might
and
be
I'll
some
just edit it
interesting
at the
stuff,
end. So,
Chakras.
yes.
When you see them, what do you see?
Okay. As I said, my seeing is very
Chakras, yeah.
is very dim, shall we say, at the moment. But and it's more as a knowing. But when I see them lying down as if the person was lying down on a table, so with the head at that end, so that there's the 7 chakras are there. So I know there's almost like 7 little cylinders, and I thought, okay, which one do I need to look at? And one will pop out.
Ah.
And so that's how I know which is. I don't actually see people's chakras and but I can feel where I need to work, sort of thing. I have actually connected to people and felt through the individual chakras, and you get different energies in each one and things like that. So, but it's not a way. And I know there are people who do chakra balancing. It's not particularly a way I work at the moment. But I've dabbled.
Is it in colour?
Sometimes, and so the great aspects of my journey has been the restoration of my clairvoyance, which as I say, I shut down as a child, and I just get little glimpses. Quite often it's monochrome and things like that. Sometimes I'll sort of see, and it's weird. I sort of know the colour without seeing the colour, which is quite weird. But yeah, I do sort of see it. So sometimes there's one technique for where you want to extract the spiritual lessons from something, and you need to know what colour it is, because there's basically for each colour there's a different lesson, which corresponds to the chakra. And sometimes I will just know what the colour is. Sometimes I have to ask with my fingers. So it's that kind of thing.
question, but it's on another thing. Does anybody else want to say that?
I was going to say, what you're talking about seems to work mainly on the basal chakra, but for the client. But for you, it works on the heart chakra. Do you ever go up to the spiritual chakra? I mean,
I'm not sure what you mean by it works on the base chakra, because what happens is when I tune into someone, I will say, okay, what chakra am I working on today? And it'll be any one of the 7. Quite often, so because the particular clients I'm working on are very much associated with people making spiritual breakthroughs, it's very often either the crown chakra or the third eye, or the heart as well.
Yeah,
but
if you're asking that, yes.
But I just get intuitively told this is what I'm working on today.
Yes. I thought it was just the way you said they came in more like that, which is very much basal.
Well, it's just in
They
terms
won't
of
alter it.
when I was talking about that. That's more the frequency of what I'm feeling in terms of the emotional block that they need to work on today. That's all I mean. So.
It's wonderful when it opens, isn't it? Get
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
It's amazing feeling.
Sorry.
I think it's fine. No, but I think we're okay for time. It's fine. Going back to the stone circle, and you're saying you know Cornwall. I don't know all of the sites. I've only been to a couple of them. I was thinking about sort of that sort of connection. You said the circle initiated you. It's like it switched you on.
It did basically. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you were given sort of almost like instruction.
Yes.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah. Forgotten what my question was going to be, but I was just kind of just sort of fascinated in.
Do you want me to just expand
ley
on
lines,
that?
ley lines.
All right.
Yeah, and dowsing.
Yeah. Not really done much to do with ley lines and dowsing particularly. I do remember sometimes walking around places and suddenly feeling, there's some kind of weird, this is way back, some kind of weird energy going along this path here or something like that. But what I do with stone circles at the moment, I haven't done very much of this, is I was shown that you need to connect all the different sort of sacred sites together to form like a giant energetic grid. So I don't know if you've been to the Devil's Quoits out in Stanton Harcourt.
No.
It's a stone circle just out in Stanton. It's a really nice one as well. Anyway, so that's our local stone circle. And what I do is I go there, I open up the circle using the way I was shown, and then say, okay, I want to connect from here to somewhere else. And so the place I initiated is Basine Stone Circle up near Treagerseal, just right down St Just. Just in Penwith, right down at the very, very end. And so I thought, okay, I want to connect here, the Devil's Quoits, to Basine Stone Circle. So I feel, okay, how do I get there? And I can feel, so okay, it's over there, as it were, but there's I can feel 3 blocks in between. So okay, I've got to get through those blocks. So then I use the healing tool that they gave me. It's okay, I'm going to need to work through the blocks. So for each one, I heal the first block, and okay, that's gone. Heal the second block, that's gone. And then by the end, now I've got through. It's like removing an emotional block or anything like that. Is at the end, you feel a flow. So I feel, okay, now this is flowing. I'm now connected to Basine, and that feels good, and things like that. And then, okay, I now want to go and connect to this one. So have you ever been to the Rollright Stones?
Yes.
Right. So I went to the Rollright Stones about a month and a half ago. And so when I went to Devil's Quoits, it felt beautiful. I just walked, I can feel it again now. I was walking from the car park and I could feel it calling me. I could feel it pulling me. And I thought, oh God, something's going on here. Anyway, I went to the Rollright Stones and I walked into it and I thought, there's a lot of pain here. And it was really wounded. It was really deeply wounded. And so, okay, I've got to have to do some work here. So this was a lovely Sunday afternoon, full of people wandering around, children play. It's like, okay, feeling a bit self-conscious here. But anyway, so I went and just stood in the middle of the circle and sort of opened up the circle and could feel this wound and started to do my stuff. And And then in the end, I just sat down to do it, and it was a really deep wound. It took a long time, a lot of fighting. It felt like some deep betrayal or something like that. It took a long time to work through. But eventually, it seemed to clear. And then over the other side of the road, there's another standing stone. I went over there.
There is, yeah.
Kingston.
Yes, the Kingstone. And I went over there. Oh, there's a wound here, so I had to go and do that one as well, and things like that. And I'm not quite sure whether I completely finished that, but I might need to go back. But anyway, what I'm going to do next is join the rollright stones to the Devil's Quest. So I'm just connecting them all up.
What's the block between the stones you have to remove?
Well, I don't know. It's just some kind of earth energetic wound.
Okay.
That's all I know. But I know, all I know is what it feels like to me and how to remove it. But St Michael's Mount in Cornwall, that's a deep energetic sense. So I've been connecting things to there as well. And the idea is just make a grid, and I don't know why, but I was told that was a good thing to do.
And you were told by...
Well, it's just intuitively, you just know stuff. And, I've talked about this intuition, you just start to know stuff. I'm just walking down the street and suddenly think, oh, that really hit me. Well, a thought will pop into my head and suddenly it feels like it has a really deep meaning to it, far more than the superficial thought. And then I start asking questions or explore. It's just how my intuition works. And partly it was brought about the lady who lives in Cornwall who took me up to the Stone Circle. She does a lot of earth work, and we have conversations all the time. And I saw for her that she had some stuff to do with connecting the earth to the spiritual heavens. And she said, I see this grid and things like that, which is partly where I got the idea of the grid from. And and it just feels right. And the thing about this stuff, when it feels right, and when it doesn't feel right. And once you get that compass inside you really clear, then you use that to guide you about whether something. Oh, this feels right. Okay, I'm going to do that, and then you'll get feedback. Either if you're on the right path, it'll feel good. If you're on the wrong path, no, that was a mistake, and that kind of thing.
Do you know where the ley line goes from Rollright Stones? Because I know Rollright Stones well, and from school we cycled there one evening, and by the time we got there it was black, pitch black. And I just passed out with all the spirits round. I couldn't.
Oh, well,
yes. And the Kingstone was even worse. But the ley line goes through Long Compton, which is at the bottom of the hill. And my friend's mother lived there, and she had this beautiful French clock. And if she put it at the back of the sideboard, it wouldn't go. So she had to put it at the front of the sideboard, and then it would go. But the ley line to me is stuck there. I want to know where it goes after. Okay. Where's the next stone?
I don't know. As I said, I've not really explored ley lines, and you're piquing my interest on this.
But the grid is surely ley lines from one circle to the next.
It could well be. I know people who have drawn maps of ley lines and things, but there's two different. There's ley lines and earth lines, and one are quite straight and one are quite wibbly. Or
right, interesting.
I don't really know, to be honest. Yeah. I just do what I'm told.
But if you find out, let me know.
I will do, yes. I'm just thinking, as you say, just Long Compton. Just give me a second.
As you at the Kingstone, you're looking down onto the village.
I do feel something when as you say that. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's a sort of faint little snag on something. Okay.
I never thought of the ley lines joining the stones before.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sacred sites of all kinds, of lots of different.
I mean, it works the other way around, doesn't it? That the sacred sites are put on the ley lines.
Yeah. One that might be a powerful site is, it'll come to me, it's the one in the Lake District next to Keswick.
All right.
Castle something. Anyway, it's a viewpoint. When you're up there, you can see all of the hills around you, all the mountains around you. You get a fantastic view. And the really interesting is it's very hard to see from when you're on the ground. You can't see it. It's amazingly secluded, and it's a circle. And I don't know much about its history. I've only been there
But
once.
how do you feel when you're there?
Fantastic. I mean, it's just if you're there on a good clear day, because it's so open, You can see, you know exactly why it was put there when you stand there, you know, and that it's there as if it's protecting the territory.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll send you some
Interested to
details.
hear what you think of Avebury, because I know friends who are very passionate about Avebury. They
Indeed.
love it. They go there. They feel good there.
Yes, I haven't been
It is
yet,
exciting.
but my
Yeah.
my friend raves about Avebury. So
Yeah. A
Seems-
friend of mine bought me a crystal from there just a couple of weeks ago.
On a totally different level, I have a friend who had a similar experience to you and is still developing. And she's finding it difficult or different associating with her family. Have you had that experience?
yes, that is part of the journey.
Yes.
I'll be very honest with you that I'm actually separating from my wife as part of that. You know, it actually it actually is part of my journey. Is
Yes.
that having to go through that, and you know, I've just learnt so much from having to go through all that spiritually, and I actually think that my wife and I had. Well, I'm getting yes as I say this. My wife and I have a soul contract to do this. That she's there to a soul contract.
Oh, yeah.
That you know,
Yes.
to have. I need to go through all this grief and you know, in order to. It's basically the final push for me. So yeah, but it is really hard, and I sympathise with her. If you'd like to talk to me about it, just it's for a chat. You know,
Yes.
I'm happy to give you my details.
I do did cranial sacral therapy, and the same happened with that.
Mm.
A lot of people found who they were and on what path they were on, and that differed from their marriage.
Yes.
I always felt very guilty,
Well, no.
but they
Just a
seemed
conduit.
happy.
Just the conduit.
I can't do it.
Yes,
It's the same experience of people who have profound NDEs, near-death experiences. You know, it often means a breakup because then they find who they are, what they really want from life,
Yes.
and it may not match.
It's suddenly you're going off at a tangent on your what was a fairly sedate life path. Suddenly you're going off in a very different direction.
Yeah.
The thing is, spirituality. When suddenly people are presented with spirituality, strong spirituality in someone else, it is very challenging to that person.
It is.
And that they have well, there's three responses they can do. They can either go along with you, or at least or they can at least be tolerant of it. Say, okay, I don't understand it, but you do you. Or they can absolutely flatly refuse.
Well, they think you're mad.
Yeah, and that will often the flatly refuse will include thinking you're mad and try and do your best to convince you you're mad, which is something I had to go through. And it's challenging very often because there's part of them recognises the truth of the thing, but doesn't want to face it. And that is why their response is so strong. It's actually because they do not want to face it. It's more than they can handle.
And you can't help them with it.
And how
No,
do you
everyone has to
feel
walk their
about
own path.
Yeah, that's the frustrating bit.
Mm.
How do you feel about that?
I'm at peace with it, to be honest. It has been a really difficult journey. Well, any kind of breakup is going to be difficult, but I am at peace with it now, and I know that it was a necessary part of the whole process. Sadly.
Been there, done that.
Mm.
It's so interesting that so many of the healers today have had the exact same thing. You've got to get to the crisis, and the crisis is essential for the development.
Yes. You need something which is strong enough to that you say, okay, I have to do something about this. Because if your life is fine, you just muddle through, okay, and there's no reason to challenge yourself, So you need a crisis of some kind, or just be born, the really extreme ones are born into a crisis. I'm born into an emotion, a strongly abusive
situation that they have to others.
Where in order to survive, you have to, challenge this. So my crisis was relatively minor in that respect, but but it did include the breakup of my marriage. So
I feel it's the same with counsellors, I'm afraid.
Mm.
And so many people who are counsellors have taken it up because they've been through something. And so long as they don't pass experiences on to their clients, then, which is very often the case,
Yes.
then they make very good counsellors because they've been through a lot.
Yes. Yes.
In astrology, Chiron is the wounded healer. Comes from Greek mythology. But Chiron's position on an astrological chart can be quite illuminating if somebody's actually doing your birth chart and you look at what house it falls in. In my case, it's the 4th house, which is a home, which makes sense because my parents got divorced when I was young and we moved around a lot. So it's sort of about this idea of what is home, how do I make home, where do I make home,
You've done
is
that
a
very
theme for
successfully.
me. Yeah. I've lived in Oxford now for the longest I've ever lived anywhere, and making a new home and finding a husband. That was obviously a big theme for me. But I had to go through that really difficult phase in my childhood of not having my dad around and so on and all of that. So So Chiron, the wounded healer, I think is very appropriate here in this context.
So exciting. We live in exciting times.
Yeah.
We do.
Any other questions or comments for Adam? I've got a suggestion if there's nothing more.
So, a prevailing feeling, a general one, for me, is regarding international situation,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in Eastern Europe, and how this will unfold over the coming years.
Okay, this is something that I've got quite interested in, international affairs. Okay, there's a lot of big picture stuff going on. I think you've probably all come across the idea that we're in a time of great transition spiritually, in great ascension. And part of that process is about the breaking down of the old order to build a new order. And because there's such an extreme change going on, it's a lot of chaos. In the physical 3D world, there's a lot of chaos is a byproduct of that. And we've got people like Trump doing his thing, and everyone's wringing their hands, especially in sort of leafy Oxford, and thinking, oh my God, isn't it terrible? And of course it's terrible on some level, but I think he's here to tear down the old order, right? And part of that, his journey, I know you said East Europe, I'm talking about the West, so I'll come to that in a moment. Part of his mission is to make the way the system works at the moment so blatantly obvious in terms of the corruption and the way that people are oppressed and kept in their boxes, where they can make just enough to survive if they're lucky, but no more, so they don't have time to look up and think about the deeper pictures. And making that whole thing so blatantly obvious that people are going to wake up and say, no, I don't want this anymore. And that's part of the revolution, which is going to happen over, play out over decades, is to as we ascend spiritually, we'll start to come up with a new way of. Sorry, it's got a big yes there with one of my thoughts. We will start to have a new paradigm, and part of the work I'm doing is as I say, I'm working with unlocking certain people. It's people who are going to create that new paradigm, and I have working with some amazing people. I got one guy.
As soon as you mentioned you're working with those type of people earlier, I'm going, Trump. Is he getting around to Trump?
No, I'm not working with Trump.
I know, but in the very beginning, when you started speaking and saying that you were working with these really important people, I thought, yeah.
No, I'm working with people who are going to become really important. There's one guy. I'm convinced he's going to probably rule the whole of South America or something like that. He just has that vibe to him. It's just astonishing, And
by charisma, hopefully, not by.
Well, his story is actually it's about exploring power, because power is a very interesting thing, and the thing about power is it's deeply corrupting because it feels so good to have it, and then you end up wanting to have more and more of it, and then it becomes an end in its own right. And I think his sole contract, I'm getting a big guess as I say this, is to wield power without the corruption. So, and that
must be unique.
Yes, well, this is what it's just what we need. So anyway, part of the way the system works, as it were, is people are kept in their boxes through a lot of fear. And so, all these wars that are going on, like in Ukraine and Israel and all these kind of things, and all the way the news portrays all this thing, it's all to make us feel fearful. And that keeping us fearful means we spend our time worrying about the state of the world and things and how terrible it is, rather than looking to the stars and being on our own spiritual journey. The best thing we can do to help help the world, unless we happen to be someone who's called to be a leader or something. I'm sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. Sorry, just a little bit. The best thing we can do is basically just open ourselves up spiritually. And that shift within us all energetically will make more difference than hand-wringing about genocide and war and things. I hope that answers your question. But it's a pet topic of mine, so I always go off one way, someone else.
And concentrate on things you can do. So you can't help Ukraine, but you can smile at somebody in the street. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. Or be kind to somebody. And that's the things we can do to do that uplift. We've got to work on this uplift.
Yes.
Yeah. But this thing about fear is so interesting because they deliberately do it on the news. Deliberately.
Yeah.
And the news becomes an agent of the chaos because of it.
Well, I mean, you've only got to look at, here in the UK, how so many really rich people end up buying newspapers, and various media outlets, despite the fact that they don't really make money, or certainly newspapers don't. It's because they can then control the agenda.
Yeah.
And, it's why most newspapers are right-wing, because, lots of right-wing people want to, control the agenda. So in any election, like with Corbyn, for example, there was so much anti-Corbyn propaganda in every newspaper. It was all quite ridiculous. And then, in America, is all the people pushing the pro-Trump agenda. It's by controlling the media thing, you can control the narrative and keep people afraid.
And that's where they make their money.
That's where they make the money. Yes.
Yeah. And their power base.
Yeah. And just with social media, it's just become another whole art form. And there's all these bots, these operations just pumping out misinformation the whole time. And part of it is the spiritual journey is about opening up your spiritual discernment about what is true and what is right. And it's about you claiming your spiritual sovereignty and using your own discernment as you grow on your path. And what they're trying to get you to do is to subjugate yourself by letting go of giving up your spiritual sovereignty. So rather than you being master of your own destiny, instead you say, no, you need to listen to me and my agenda, my story. And to a certain extent, organised religion does the same thing. Is that rather than you choosing what you believe for yourself or knowing these truths, and remember I said it's experiential, rather than you knowing these truths yourselves, it says, okay, you need to believe this, and you can only get to God through me.
And you'll be safe.
Yes.
And you don't have to fear.
Yes, but you don't have to think either. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the thing. They're stopping you thinking. So, and all power structures, they try and stop you thinking. It's why they all come after the intellectual elite to start with. You only look at Harvard, what's going on there.
Yes.
Yes. You attack the critical thinkers.
But I think the two people that scare me are Putin and Netanyahu, because I don't think they're open to anything and they just bully their way through everything.
Yep.
So how can one...
They've got their job. That's their...
They've got what?
That's their job at the moment.
Yes, but how can you stop that job, or how can you...
You can't. You've got to just look above it, look down on them and say, look at those silly little boys playing with their
that's
toys.
Not going to help us, is it? We're going to have a war before that.
No, but the only thing you can do is be kind and smile at people.
Yeah, well, I try and do that.
Yeah. No, from the heart, Claire.
But also,
And
to
just-
make, but also, you know, to be your highest self. I mean, it's not, you know,
Yes.
in the sense of choosing what you can make a difference to, isn't it?
Can you work with the people that influence those two people?
I only work with the people that I'm supposed to work with. You know,
Yeah.
so you can't inflict healing on people. I can't go and...
Their soul.
Yeah,
and they've got a different contract.
Yes, they've got a different contract, and they may be doing this, as Beth says, doing this for a very good reason, right?
They are, yes.
But no, for all of us, not just for them.
Because we've got to get to a point where we say, oh, come on, this is just stupid. We shouldn't be having wars at
Right.
all. How can we make
Yeah.
it so that we're not having wars? How can
Yes.
we
It's a
live?
bit late, isn't it, now? Because
No.
we're going to have a third world war if we're not careful.
If we're not careful, because we need to be putting in the things that make that not possible.
Yes, but I don't know.
And if it happens, then that's for a reason to say, come on. I know. I would have. I mean, I used to love Vera Brittain, who put all that effort in after the First World War to say no more wars. Help push the League of Nations and to thingies, but it's not been strong enough.
But we did get the EU out of the Second World War.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
which is a political movement towards connection and growth.
Absolutely
know.
astounding that ever happened.
Yes,
I mean,
you know,
especially if you look at now.
Did we get anything out of the COVID thing that hit around the world?
funnily enough, yes, I think we
gosh,
did.
yes.
I think there
I
was
think that happened for a purpose.
that
Oh,
was
for
a
sure.
a huge shift in consciousness,
Yeah.
because you think about as a result of that, we started to appreciate nature and being able to go out and when we all locked down and then suddenly, irreversibly, our way of working has changed, and then we all work from home and we're much happier now. You know, not all of it, but it has changed us quite a lot in terms of how we think. You know, just as
And
a
if people are disabled and can't get to physical meetings, we can talk to them on Zoom.
Yes,
No,
Yes.
they're not disenfranchised anymore.
it made you.
Sort of positiveness out of it.
It made you think about what's really important.
Yeah.
You know, when people were dying around you, it made you think about what's really important.
Yeah.
And your job
normal
isn't
people
that
thought
important.
this. Normal people started to think this who didn't have
Exactly. Yeah.
a spiritual agenda beforehand.
Yeah.
What's important.
I mean, there's a lot going on at the moment. And we're being rapidly thrust upwards spiritually, and it's a bumpy ride.
It's painful.
It's a really bumpy ride, and people are going to die along the way. Now, some of those people who are dying along the way, that is their soul contract. They will die in Gaza to show the futility of war. That's their contract.
You're going to die, why?
To show the futility of war.
Yeah.
You've got to remember.
We've had war. We know what.
Well,
Well, obviously we haven't
learnt the lesson.
We're still voting right wing.
I mean, my idea about the COVID thing was that I got that from a channel at the time. She's saying, this is done for a purpose.
Yeah,
This is it.
yeah.
And it made me think,
Yeah.
it is.
And the other one about
That's a very
interoperability.
intellectual way of putting it. if
Very
I may
what?
say so. It's a very intellectual way of putting it, if I may say so.
Well,
Those children,
I
they're
know.
just dying.
they are. Yes. But you've got to remember, from a soul perspective, there's no such thing as death.
I can't go wrong with it.
It's I think
much
yeah.
The body, that's just
Have you experienced any past lives, for example?
Yes.
Okay, so you know that you've lived before. That when you die, you're not dead. You're going to go and live another one, depending on what you've chosen to do.
But they say we choose to who our parents are going to be or whatever
Yeah.
before we
I
come
don't
down.
choose
No, I
to
don't believe that.
starve
I
to
wouldn't.
death.
You might do.
Surely
your
not.
soul,
Injured and
what your
all that
soul
sort of thing.
has
Well,
chosen
I know this
for
is-
your growth.
I know this is
I'm too
difficult.
emotionally
I've got to
involved in
this
it, I
age and I
can't.
still don't know.
Well, I know.
anything.
Look,
I've got
you
time
can't.
to grow
If
now.
one has
that's
any
what
shred
I'm
of
saying.
empathy,
That's what I'm saying.
if one has any shred of empathy, you can't help but feel for these people. It's horrific what's going on. But on a soul level, I don't know if you've read "Dying to Be Me" by Anita Moorjani.
No.
That's a very nice description of what it's like to die and to be floating around in sort of not, in not life. And the perspective is so completely different in that you are this infinite soul And, you know, from that perspective, all the stuff you've experienced in life it's almost like just going into a video game and then you come out of it again, you know. And so in a video game you die, you don't think any...
But that's once you've gone, that's all
Yeah.
right. You're not suffering.
No,
It's the suffering that...
for sure.
That's a different issue.
It's really, there's no two ways about it. What you're saying, you're right, it's really tough to get your head around it, you know, and to a certain extent what I'm saying is intellectual. But, you know, I've seen a number of my past lives, and, you know, and when you see these things and experience death and things and great suffering and things like that, and then, oh, here I am now again, looking back on that, and it wasn't the end of everything. You know, I've experienced myself being brutally tortured and mutilated, you know, in a past life.
Yes.
You know,
But so the question is, what did you learn from that? I mean, what's your soul learned from that?
Well,
other than
what you
past?
learn is you get a better perspective from it. In that it's actually, I have in many lives been a sort of a healer or a sage or a seer. You know, this has been a path I've explored many times, and you know, I was being tortured for that. You know, just like these days. Yeah, the worst case, you know, people might think you're an idiot, call you mad, or maybe you get divorced, but you don't get burned at the stake.
Yeah.
You know, in past lives, you would get burnt at the stake or tortured and things, and I've experienced that.
The equivalent is now getting bombed, isn't it?
You don't
Maybe
generally get bombed for
starved to
for
death.
being spiritual. That's why I'm talking about being spiritual now, rather than being,
Yeah.
you know, and
And
you, there are lessons to learn from these things about, you know, your true spiritual nature, and about whether, you know, you're shown the choice about whether you want to stand up in your truth, your spiritual truth, and speak out at the risk of being ridiculed or worse, and make that decision. And you need, as I said, it's part of the journey. Is you all at some stage have to decide: am I comfortable being seen and heard and saying this stuff, you know? And it depends on what your path is, but, you know, for a lot of the people I work with, it's you always come to this decision: am I prepared to put my head above the parapet? And the fact that you've seen it in past lives, and where you've chosen the other choice and regret it. I mean, I've had lives where I've chosen to stay in the relationship rather than to break up, and regretted it. You know, so, you know, you see all these things. And it just puts it all into perspective, basically. When you all these scenarios, they've all played out so many times before. You know, all the stuff we get so caught up in. We've done it all before. You know, it's just
this is so Oxford.
Well, yes.
I can see your point, but I just find all this suffering,
It's unbearable.
unbearable.
It's just, well,
And I have regressed, and I've regressed other people and had past lives and so on. But always in the past lives, I've helped somebody else. And I may not have achieved what I wanted, but there's been the positiveness. And I find now in places like Gaza and in Netanyahu and Putin, there is no positiveness. I can't see...
the thing you've got to remember is
Tell
that
me.
the... all right, rephrase that. Sorry, that's a bit condescending. The thing I find...
Do say it. I
No,
don't mind.
the thing I find useful, that helps me in the perspective on this, is that what we're now talking about is shaping the global landscape. And, you know, whereas if you're regressing individual people and helping them on their individual journey, then, you know, you can help them. But we're talking about what the future course of humanity is going to be. And so it doesn't happen on an individual level. It happens on a national level. It happens on a global level. And so nationally and globally, nations need to sometimes die, or, you know, it needs to be so utterly abhorrent that we say never again. You know, and I'm hoping maybe this time we might say that.
How does Israel even begin to think
Well, I
that
know.
they're not doing exactly the same
The
as
irony
done to
of
them?
the absolute irony of it all is, yes. And it's Netanyahu who, you know, he's doing this partly in order to cling on to power because of all the corruption charges. You know, so there's a lot going on there, and you know, his own personal journey is this old chestnut of of power and how it corrupts and things like that. But also he's playing a part in shaping the geopolitical landscape of the world.
So why would Trump want to take on Canada and Greenland? And that's a bit
That's weird.
He's
Not
pushing.
having Canada,
Well, I mean,
throw away
superficially,
my passport if he gets that.
superficially, Trump wants to do these things because of mineral rights. Because
Yeah.
the great asset these days is rare earth minerals that China's been hoarding. But it's just he's pushing every button just to get us to think about what is actually important to us. What is what is the truth? What are we going to tolerate?
You are all a lot younger than me, and I think I belong to the generation that's going out. So I haven't really got to face all this. But I do feel sorry for everybody else who's still here, who has
But
to
you've got
face
grandchildren. They
It's-
do face
it. Oh,
it.
don't remind me of that.
They do. I mean,
To be honest,
Well, those thoughts go through my head, but they have for
I mean,
years. You've got grandchildren,
I
what's
understand.
happened to the world, and yeah, you do think of it.
Yes.
I mean, I thought of my kids even when I had the kids, and that's years ago.
But that's their life, isn't it? They're going to deal. I admire the youngsters because they always cope with whatever's coming up. But I think when you're on the way out, you've belonged to that generation, and that's it. Bang, gone, bang. So goodbye, everybody.
now, haven't you
Yeah,
done a
I'm
course
about-
about spirituality in later life?
Yes, I'm not running that one at the moment, but Claire was on it.
I've been to it once.
I obviously didn't help very much. And we should wrap up, friends. It's 12 now. It's noon. So,
Yes.
thank you, Adam.
Oh dear,
very
did you
much.
record that?